This is Unit 5A, so let's get started with 1. A high school principal wanted to know how the teachers at her school felt about early dismissal and for homecoming. She put the names of 114 faculty in a hat and randomly selected 30 of the names. She gave questionnaires to those 30 people asking whether they agreed or disagreed with the following statement. Valuable learning time should not be sacrificed for extracurricular social activities. The questionnaires were filled out anonymously. Her conclusion was that 80% of the faculty were opposed to early dismissal for homecoming. Now, we're supposed to use the guidelines to evaluate the study from the information given. What's the biggest flaw? Well, please go to page 312 for this to see those guidelines. And the wording of the question's problematic. She voiced an opinion in the way she worded the question, so that's the problem. For number 2, and so that's choice C. For number 2, a health researcher randomly selected 500 high school students from the city of Oak Grove. In a private interview, the researcher asked the students whether they had ever used drugs. She concluded that only 8% of the high school students at Oak Grove had ever used drugs. Well, why is this, what's problematic about this thing? And the problem is the setting may discourage honest responses. Here they are in the high school. How many high school students, aren't there going to be some that are just going to not admit to it? And so that's B. For 3, a researcher published this, and by the way, we have to determine whether what type of bias this involves. So a researcher published this survey result. 74% of the people would be willing to spend 10% more for energy from a non-polluting source. The survey question was announced and on a national radio show, and 1,200 listeners responded by calling in. And the question is, how is this bias? And well, first of all, it's participation bias because not everybody, if you have strong feelings, you might participate, but otherwise you won't. And secondly, it's selection bias in that, how many people were, this was only open to the people that were listening to that particular radio show. So we've got both participation bias and selection bias. Now, you are interested in the degree of satisfaction amongst customers at your video store. For 1 week, you hand a customer satisfaction questionnaire to every customer who comes into the store and ask them to fill it out and place it in a box after they check out. And so that's an example of participation bias, because there's a lot of people that are going to come into the store and just not bother filling this thing out. And they might have an opinion one way or the other, but they're not going to bother. With 5, choose the best wording for the question in the study. A recent magazine article determined that the Gemini is the most popular car on the road. A TV journalist decided to check the accuracy of the article by conducting a survey. Which of the following survey questions will give the journalist the most accurate results? Well, the one that has the least Implication of favor in any manner is what kind of car do you drive? Selection A. Now listen, I want to point out with these, you really have to go over the section, read the section in order to understand this. This is not enough if you want to get the most out of this section and feel comfortable with the material. What we're doing is not enough. You do have to read it. Read the text. So number 6, a researcher wishes to determine the level of support for a new environmental law. Which of the following questions will produce the most accurate result? And it's A. How do you feel about the new environmental law? If you read the rest of these questions, you'll find out there's bias. So let's stop right here. We'll go on to part 2.